Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know how this works. We take one idea, go deep, really explore it, and hopefully you walk away with something valuable.
Exactly.
Today we're going to be diving into the work of Neville Goddard, specifically his lecture, God and I Are One, which he delivered on April 8, 1972. Now, his work can be a little out there for some, but I think there's a lot to learn here, so let's just kind of dive right in. What do you say?
Yeah, sounds great.
So Neville Goddard starts this lecture with kind of a bold statement. He says that the I of man, the sense of I am, is actually God. Like, not separate from God, but the same thing.
Right, and that's really the central premise of his whole lecture, this idea of the unity of the individual self with the divine.
Yeah.
It's a concept that runs throughout a lot of mystical traditions, but Goddard really emphasizes this point.
Yeah. So he spends a good chunk of this lecture talking about how this idea plays out in the Bible. Like, he points to the passage in Matthew where Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do men say that the Son of Man is?"
And the disciples give all these different answers, right? John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, a prophet.
Right. But then Jesus asks this pivotal question, "But who do you say that I am?"
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting, because Peter steps forward and says, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God."
Okay, so how does Goddard interpret this?
So Goddard really focuses on this term, Son of Man. He says it's not just referring to a specific person, Jesus, but to the I that's present in every human being, that sense of awareness, consciousness, what he also calls the human imagination. He's saying that this is the same Son of Man that Jesus is referring to.
I see. So he's connecting the I in each of us to this concept of the Son of Man and then to Christ.
Exactly. And then he goes on to explain that Christ in the New Testament is described as the power and wisdom of God.
Right.
So by connecting the I with the Son of Man and the Son of Man with Christ, he's essentially saying that the I of man is the power and wisdom of God.
Wow. That's a pretty big claim, right?
Oh yeah, it's huge. And he doesn't shy away from it at all. In fact, he goes on to say that if we don't realize this, if we don't recognize that our own I am is this divine power, then we can't actually exercise that power. It's like having a superpower and not knowing it.
So it's not just about believing in God. It's about realizing that you are God.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so if we are God, if our I am is God, then what? Like, how does that play out in our everyday lives?
Well, that's where Goddard gets into the idea of testing. He actually encourages people to test this idea out for themselves, to really consider the possibility that their own sense of I am is the God that they've been praying to, the God that they've been looking for outside of themselves.
But how do you test that? What does that even look like?
He doesn't lay out a specific set of steps, but he really emphasizes the importance of imagination and assumption. He says that we need to use our imagination to assume the state that we desire and to really believe that it's already done.
Okay, so it's kind of like if you can imagine it and believe it, then it can become your reality.
Right. And he ties this back to the Bible, specifically the passage in John that says, "No one has ever ascended into heaven, but he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man."
Right, and that's another passage where he focuses on that term, Son of Man, right?
Yeah, exactly. He interprets this to mean that we, as individuals, are pre-existent beings who have descended into this world, into these physical bodies. And he talks about ascension not as a physical event, but as a shift in consciousness. He even compares it to the story of Moses lifting up the serpent in the wilderness.
So what's he getting at with that comparison?
Well, he's talking about this idea of rising up, of ascending to a higher level of awareness, but not in a physical sense. It's about raising our consciousness, our awareness, to the point where we realize our own divinity.
So it's like a spiritual journey, not a physical one.
Exactly. And he even goes on to describe the ascended form as still having a human face, hands, and voice, but with this indescribable body of infinite power and wisdom.
It's almost like we're wearing these physical bodies, like garments, for this particular experience, but our true form is something much greater.
Right. And he actually uses that analogy, the idea of the human body being a garment that we wear for this particular drama.
Interesting. But then he also talks about ranks in heaven, like apostles and prophets.
Yeah.
Doesn't that suggest some sort of hierarchy, like some beings are closer to God than others?
That's a good question, and Goddard actually addresses this directly. He says that being sent, which is what apostle means, is not about personal merit or superiority. It's a gift of grace. And he emphasizes that anyone who's been sent shouldn't boast about it because it's not something they've earned.
Okay, so it's not about being better than anyone else. It's about fulfilling a specific role.
Exactly. And he also talks about the remnant or the elect being chosen by grace, not by ethnicity or religion. So he's really trying to avoid any kind of elitism or hierarchy in his teaching.
So it's about recognizing the divinity in everyone.
Right. And then he gets into the practical application of this whole idea. He talks about the power of the declaration, I am. Just those two words, without any qualifiers.
So like I am, without saying I am a doctor or I am a parent or anything like that.
Right. Just the pure awareness of being. This says that this is God. And because all things are possible for God, then whatever state we assume after that declaration, I am, has the potential to become our reality.
Okay. But how do we assume a state?
Through our imagination. By feeling it as if it were already true. And he emphasizes the importance of faith here. Not faith in a traditional religious sense, but faith in the power of our own I am.
So it's about trusting that our own sense of being is the ultimate creative power.
Exactly. And that leads him to his interpretation of prayer. He says that true prayer isn't about begging some external God for things. It's about recognizing the God within and aligning ourselves with the state that we desire.
Okay, but doesn't the Bible talk about praying to God?
It does, but Goddard interprets those passages in a different way. He says that the command he received was to move away from external forms of worship and ceremonies. He sees a pattern in the Old Testament about the Son of Man, the I of man, being accomplished within each individual.
So it's about an internal transformation, not an external one.
Right, and he describes this awakened individual as someone who goes through the same experiences that are described in the Bible about Jesus, but not literally. It's all happening within their own consciousness.
It's like a symbolic reenactment of the story of Jesus, but it's happening within each individual.
Exactly. He talks about being born from above, coming out of the graves, ascending like a fiery serpent, the dove descending, all these images from the Bible, but he's interpreting them in a very personal, internal way.
Wow. So it's not about waiting for some external event. It's about realizing this truth within ourselves.
Right. And he keeps coming back to this idea of testing. He says, test this faith that your own wonderful I amness is God. If that's true, he says, then it should be provable through our own experience.
So it's not just a theory, it's something that we can actually put into practice and see if it works.
Exactly. And he gives examples from his own life and from the lives of people he's known where they've used this principle to manifest things in their reality. Like, he tells the story of a woman who was struggling financially after a divorce, and she started assuming that she had everything she needed, plus and plus, and shortly after that, she received a large order from a bank.
Wow. So it's like she changed her internal state, and that manifested in her external reality.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that this power is the same in everyone. We're all one, he says. The creative power is identical in all of us, regardless of our circumstances.
But if we're all one, why do we experience so much separation and division?
He says it's because we have trouble staying in the present tense of I am. We get caught up in thoughts about the past or worries about the future, and that creates a sense of separation.
That makes sense. We're not really present in that pure awareness of I am.
Right, and that's why he talks about the importance of helping others. He says, you are myself pushed out, meaning that when we help others, we're ultimately helping ourselves.
So it's not about charity or pity, it's about recognizing our own interconnectedness.
Exactly. And he gives a specific process for how to help others using this principle. He says that we should imagine the person already having what they desire and feel the joy of it as if it were already done, and then trust that the inner being, the God within them, will bring it to pass.
Okay, so it's not about begging God to help someone, it's about seeing them as already whole and complete.
Right. And he tells another story about a woman whose furniture was stolen. Instead of getting upset, she used her imagination to recreate her furnished apartment in her mind. And then she found her maid who had taken the furniture and got it all back.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's like she created the outcome she wanted through her imagination, and then the details work themselves out.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that we don't need to know how it's going to happen. We just need to trust that the inner being knows the way.
That's a lot of trust, though.
It is, but he says that this is the kind of faith that we need to cultivate. Faith in our own I amness. Faith in the power of our own imagination.
Okay, but where does Jesus fit into all of this?
He says that the story of Jesus is going to repeat itself within each of us, but not literally. He says that no external Jesus is going to appear. It's all about realizing the truth of I am within ourselves.
So Jesus is more like a symbol of our own potential.
Exactly. He says that in that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. He's talking about that realization of oneness, of the unity of the individual self with the divine.
So it's all about changing our inner reality in order to change our outer reality.
Right. He says that our I amness, our consciousness, our imagination is God, and the external world is just a shadow of that inner reality.
So if we want to change the shadow, we have to change the object that's casting the shadow.
Exactly. And he gives examples of people like Bob Hope, who achieved great success through their inner state, regardless of their external qualifications.
So it's not about what you have or who you know, it's about who you are on the inside.
Right. And he concludes by saying that the ultimate goal is to awaken to who we truly are, to realize that the world is mine and all within it, to know that we can fulfill our own needs and desires from within without having to beg or seek externally.
That's a really empowering message.
It is, and it's one that I think a lot of people are searching for today.
So to recap, Neville Goddard's message in this lecture is that our own I amness, our consciousness, our imagination is God. And that by realizing this truth and applying it in our lives, we can create the reality that we desire.
And he challenges us to test this idea out for ourselves.
It's definitely something to think about.
Absolutely. And it leads to a really important question. If your own sense of being is the fundamental creative force of the universe, what will you now choose to identify with? What kind of reality will you create from that place of knowing?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. Thanks for diving in with us today. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of Neville Goddard's God and I Are One.
It was a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring.
And keep creating.